Hello. Thank you so much for coming here. And first of all, thank you so much to Widespace for hosting this meetup. And I also like to say hi to the live stream audience. So we are live from here. We will see how many that will join us. And well, this is maybe the last Stockholm.js for this season. We will get back after summer. We will see. Maybe we squeeze one in June, but I know that usually doesn't happen. So we will see. And well, yeah, I don't have so much to say. So I want to welcome our first speaker up, Fredrik.
Thank you, Johnny. Is this all right? Yeah. So, welcome everyone to this Stockholm.js hosted by Widespace. It's really nice to see so many here. So Widespace is a mobile advertising company. For those who didn't know, we built our technology from the ground up and have been in business for 10 years now, almost. So yeah, and we're always looking for good people. This is usually why companies host these kinds of events. So, I'm going to talk a bit about Wisper RPC, which is a little piece of technology we've developed here. You can't really talk about this without talking about JSON RPC. How many in this room have heard about JSON RPC? That's quite a few. How many have used it? Huh? I counted about 4 or 5. So, I probably don't have to explain the JSON part to this audience. I mean, JSON is kind of native to JavaScript. But RPC is a bit foreign to a lot of people. It stands for Remote Procedure Call. It's a really old idea. Like everything in programming, we think that we've come up with something new and clever, but someone wrote a paper about it in the 60s. It's no different here. There are several papers about it from the 60s. It got its name in the 80s, so it's kind of new that way. So it's basically a way to run code somewhere else, as if you were running it locally. When they theorized about this, the cool thing weren't functions, it was subroutines. So that's why it says unit of code. It can basically be anything that's native to the other environment you're calling. For us, the context is usually different machines, or different threads, or different languages in our case. So JSON RPC is a JSON protocol based around the RPC idea, kind of like the name implies. It's a very basic protocol that supports anything that can be serialized and deserialized and sent as JSON, basically. So it's a request-response protocol, and the next slide will show how that looks. And it's completely transport agnostic. I mean, you can use it over basically anything where you can send text between two environments. So this is the basic way it looks. You specify the JSON RPC version, both a sender and receiver. It supports both what they call notifications and invocations, I think. It's basically if you care about the response, you don't send a notification. If you just want to send something to the other side so they can do something with it, you send a notification. Params is optional, but if you specify params, it should be an array or an object. And the ID here is like a message ID, so sender and receiver should send the same ID to identify that this is the response to the request. And the way the receiver tells that it's a notification is if there's no ID in the request. So IDs are very important if you want a response. So Wisper RPC is basically JSON RPC. Not quite, it's very, very influenced by it. But it adds a few things on top of it. And it's basically the concept around remote objects. So you can construct and destruct remote objects, or classes in our case. You can call instance methods, and you can call static methods. And the third thing that it adds is event messages, which is basically a way to, basically you can subscribe to things you're interested in, and it will just send notifications whenever something changes. And it looks like this. So you can see that the thing that has been added compared to the previous example is basically this little tilde sign, which is a way to tell the other side that we want to construct an object there. So this is a class constructor. It's like typing new in JavaScript. And the result contains both the ID of the request, but in the result it also contains the ID of the created instance. So this is something that we will save for later, so that whenever we want to call this instance, we send that ID. And if the class, whatever it is, has any default props that gets instantiated in the constructor, you will get them as params. DESTRUCTOR reuses the tilde, but with combining it with a colon. And that means that something colon means that I'm calling an instance. And using the tilde means that I want to kill this instance. And when you kill an instance, you don't need to send the ID of the instance if you don't care about knowing that it was destroyed. Static methods are basically mapped with dots. So if we made our implementation of date as a remote date, we could call its now function like this. And you would get back a timestamp, basically. And again, we don't need ID here if we don't care about the response, but calling date now and not caring about the response would be kind of silly. So, like I said, instant methods is basically some namespace, which is a class in this case, colon, and the method you want to call. And the first argument should be the instance ID. That's not very optional here. So if we call cook on our banana, we get a banana salad. Event messages comes with an exclamation mark. Oh, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry, can you go back one slide? Was the params for the constructor argument or for the method argument?
The params, the params is the instance ID. So the question was if the params were like an argument to the class or just an identifier for the class. And this is an identifier. Because we called, well, okay. I was supposed to call fruit with a banana, but I didn't, sorry. So fruit was supposed to have a fruit already, and all we needed to do was cook it. So the first param is always the instance ID. So if I wanted to send the fruit to cook, it would be just be the second argument. So event messages are marked by an exclamation point. And same here. If it's an event from an instance, the first argument will be the identifier for the instance. Event messages can also come from like statically listening to something, and then there is no instance identifier. And the way you can tell them apart is that you have, in the method, you have a colon, and if it was static, you wouldn't have it. Event messages are just notifications. They expect no response. So, why did we build this? The first use case was an ad bridge. We have an ad SDK for native apps, which we have had since 2009, I think. I dare to say we were kind of pioneers in this space. And the ads since the start have been running web tech. They have been HTML based with some more and more JavaScript as time has gone by. And the ads want to use native functionality. This was even more true in the beginning when you could do basically nothing in the browser on mobile, but you could do everything in apps. And then it was really important for the ad to be able to trigger some native behavior. And we made a beautiful system that I was partly responsible for, where we made basically JavaScript CSS comments, the slash asterisk with an SDK command. So we did slash asterisk SDK video and an ID of a video to play. And it worked, but as time went by, we wanted to do more and more things. We wanted to actually have some control over the native side from the JavaScript side. And a few years after we released our SDK, there was a new standard for mobile rich media ads, as they call them, that sort of defined how this should work. And this standard is terrible. It's all fire and forget. We could basically have implemented it by making these mraid methods call the SDK comments. Patrick over there is very happy about this. But we wanted to do something better. We wanted to have an actual bridge. We wanted to be able to create a native video object and then get back a local object to our JavaScript ad. And we wanted to be able to talk to that object like if it was an HTML5 video. And that's where Wisper comes into play. Because with Wisper, we can actually create a media player on the native side that is a native media player. But we have a JavaScript class that looks like an HTML5 player, basically. And we can call play, we can call pause, we can get all the metrics from it. We can do basically whatever we want. And the same is true for like the other basic ad tech stuff that advertiser wants to do and users are maybe not as happy about, like saving images to gallery, saving calendar events, all of that stuff. We can do with Wisper. That was such a success, so the guys on the SDK team thought that we could do more with it. We could basically put a lot of the native SDK logic in JavaScript. So we have quite a big problem with the SDK, is that the ad SDK is something that an app publisher puts in their app to show ads, control ads, and get money. And whenever we release an SDK with a bug in it, well, first of all, it takes a little while for someone to report it. And then we need to fix it and put out a new version. And that takes some time, usually not that much. But then all the publishers that are running the funky version needs to update their app with our new version. And that can take forever. A lot of big publishers don't have their own tech departments, so they have some consultant update their app once per year, basically. And then the users have to actually update the publisher's app. And this is something that grandmas never do. And basically, we have 4, 5-year-old SDK versions out there, probably. So the idea was that we could solve this with Wisper. If we put most of the logic in JavaScript, that can be updated by downloading new JavaScript. We don't need to release a new SDK. We don't need to get apps through the App Store. Basically the same idea that later on Facebook and Microsoft has had with React Native and Code Push. So that was the motivation for it. And the real mastermind behind it is a guy that is unfortunately no longer with us. He went to Google. Yeah. But then we have our iOS guru, Patrick, over there. And another guy who is consulting for Microsoft right now. And one of our developers from Bangladesh, Rana, and myself, who's mostly like a fanboy of the project. I used it for something completely different. My team built an ad builder that's a separate app that's included in other apps. So we used Wisper to create the bridge. Basically, you have the app that wants the ad builder basically says new ad builder and some config. And then it gets back an ad builder object, which lets the host control the ad builder. So that's what we used it for. Since yesterday, installing it is this easy. We fought internally for a long time to open source this. And when we finally got the okay to open source it, no one had any time to put that extra little love into the project. So it's sort of been drifting on its own. I don't know if anyone external has found it on GitHub. But yeah, now we can install it like this. And there are libraries for JavaScript and for Java/Android and for iOS in the repo or in the org on GitHub. I'm going to spend my time with the JavaScript side because, well, other than Rust, that's who I am. And that's probably why most of you are here too. So the project comes with a bridge for iframes. And the iframes can be not same domain if you want to, which is probably one of the most important use cases. Because when you're communicating between iframes that are on the same domain, all you can do is send text. You can't access anything. And this is where Wisper really shines. So let's say you had an imaginary case where you had an iframe with, well, let's say you had a page with only one iframe, you could run this code. And let's say that inside the iframe we had this super complicated method for adding two numbers. Then we could call it like this. And we would alert the result, because that's how JavaScript developers debug stuff. And on the iframe we would run this code. We would, sorry. So here we initiate the iframe bridge with the content window of the iframe. And all it does with that is basically listen to it for the message event and post messages to it. And on the iframe side, we do the same, but we listen to the parent and post messages to the parent. And the bridge comes with a little helper function for exposing functions to the other side, which is appropriately named expose function. So yeah, this is basically the whole implementation. So that's quite easy, but that's not, yes?
You said across domains you can only send messages through iframes.
Yes.
Are we talking about the standard web iframe? Like
yes.
Can you explain how that works?
Okay, so the question was that between cross-domain iframes you can only send messages, and how that works. So if you have a same domain iframe, you can basically access, the iframe can access anything on the parent through proper JavaScript and do whatever it wants. And vice versa, the parent can do anything it wants inside the iframe. Full access. If the iframes are not from the same domain, I mean, all web security is based around the same domain policy. So if they are not on the same domain, you're not allowed to access anything inside of the iframe. And the iframe is not allowed to access anything on the parent. But both of them can call post message and send text to the other. And both of them can listen to the message event for post messages from the other side.
So it's basically like AX requests going back and forth?
Yeah, it's a text bridge, basically. So it's a way to send and receive text. And you can't really do anything malicious by sending and receiving text, unless the other side is like stupid and running eval on it or something like that. So
but behind the scenes, is it just taking the href from the iframe and sending messages to that, and it's going to be picked up on the other side, or is it some?
It's a JavaScript implementation in the browser. So there's a JavaScript API on both sides. So for Wisper, we of course send the Wisper RPC protocol we showed before. Yeah, so that's basically all you need to know about bridging iframes, I hope. Somewhat more interesting might to bridge web workers, because web workers are awesome. They are a way to let you run code in a separate thread, so you basically got multi-threaded client-side JavaScript, finally. Hooray. But they have no access to the DOM or anything, so if you want to make complicated, like in the React world, you can make like complicated render things in a worker, but then you want to have some way to actually get that on the page. And I'm not going to show you that, because that would be too much for a post. But very much like iframes, it has the onMessage or add event listener message and post message methods. So we can use Wisper. That's basically everything you need for Wisper, some way to send text back and forth. So Wisper comes with an iframe bridge already built for you. So to try it out on workers, I built a web worker bridge, and it's surprisingly little work, to be honest. So I extend the base bridge from Wisper, which has all the clever stuff in it, like the expose function method and the other stuff that I showed. As the target for the worker, I send the target to post message to and listen to events from. We need to listen to data somehow, so we basically just do add event listener, and on the message event we do this. Receive JSON is something on the base bridge. So all we need to do is basically tell the bridge how to get JSON. And then we need to tell the bridge how to send JSON. And that's all you actually need to do to build a Wisper bridge. Close is optional, but it's probably good to clean up this listener when we're done. Otherwise, something scary might happen. And export it. So I showed you how to basically run arbitrary functions across the bridge before. For the worker, we're gonna do something a little more advanced. We're gonna actually create remote objects. So to do that, we need to import a few more things than before. Local here is a class that you can extend to create a local version of the remote object. And the interface name and properties are decorators that you can do on your class. So this is the bridge from the last slide. And this is how you start a new web worker if you're not familiar with that API. So that, of course, means that I have a dist/worker file that it can find. And I send the new worker to the bridge. And I won't actually log stuff, but workers have extremely little in the way of JavaScript APIs. There's no window object. There's basically nothing that you're used to. But through the bridge, we can make our own little console log function. So on the host side here, we can expose the console log and call the real console log that we have access to here. Interface name is a decorator that basically tells the bridge what we should listen for to call this class. Properties is a more magical decorator that basically automatically listens to changes on a class property and sends them across the bridge whenever they change. It's really useful for when you want to keep things in sync. Like for the video player, we have like the actual current time of the video player is like currently or all the time sent. So this class extends local. And it takes a CSS style selector. So if I remember right, I'm going to send it hash color or something. So it just runs query selector to try to find the element and save it for later. And to test this color listener sending event messages actually working, I'm going to, every 5 seconds, change the color to green and see if the other side receives it. And the implementation of style isn't that important, but it basically takes an object of style properties and values and tries to apply them to the matched node that we found there. And to actually start this, we listen to a click on a button on the page. So we invoke the pick color function on the other side. So this is the worker. Yeah, that's not the right line. But it extends remote instead of local. And the bridge is very much the same. Like I said, workers don't have a window object, but they have a self object that is kind of similar. And we make a little console object here, which has a method called log that calls the object on the other side. And the decorator setup is very much like before. Do we have to speed this up a bit? Ah, okay. I'll try to be a bit quick about this. So yeah, we extend remote. And the implementation of style is basically calling across the bridge to the style method on the other side. And sending the object that comes in. And the first param is the ID of this class. We actually found when experimenting today that we have a helper for this, so you could actually just decorate style with a decorator called the auto method, and I wouldn't have to write any of this code. But it's not in the public repository, so we're going to have to make a new version with that. And this is where we listen to pick color and basically find our div the first time, and then we're just going to run methods on it. And there is some super hard rocket science to generate a random number. And then you call it like you would call it if it was like a local, well, I don't think this is jQuery syntax, but basically. And this is our little listener for when the color changes on the other side. So every 5 seconds, we get the color green here, and we send a style change back to the other side. So they send us a color, we send the color back as a style change. So this is very useful code. You should absolutely copy this and run it in your projects. Yeah, and that was it. One more window. So to prove to you that I'm not making this up, we generate a random color here, so you can see all the Wisper arguments coming back and forth here, and basically every 5 seconds we're gonna get the color green. And if I press this again, whoops, it will generate a new color, but then the green will come back and replace it. So yeah, this is what you can use Wisper for, and nothing else. So yeah, that was it. Thank you.
And I think we have time for a few questions, if there are any. Someone? Question
Yes.
like that? No, we take the front first. It's easier for me.
How about decorating a class? Is there any way to make it like even easier to automatically decorate all the members of a class and make them available?
Yes, it's definitely possible.
Will you do it?
There
Do you accept pull requests?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure how useful the use case will be to decorate absolutely everything back and forth, because sometimes you want to just keep some things as private implementation and some things on the other side. But yeah, it would definitely be easy to write.
Okay, me.
Yes.
Really nice stuff. I like it. I'm curious about resource management on the remote side. If I understood you correctly, you can create objects on the remote side. How do you manage the life cycle of these objects and make sure that, you know, not run out of memory or something?
Hopefully very cleverly, I would say. You kind of give up control to the client side to manage it for as long as the client side lives. But then we have the close method for cleaning up when the client disconnects or tells us that they stopped using Wisper. So, I mean, that's the main part of it. Like on the close method, clean up the resources that you allocated. You can, of course, do some sort of timeout if you hear nothing for 5 minutes, clean it up anyway. Yeah, like any resource management, basically.
Any more questions?
Sorry, I'm not a big user or creator of apps, but you said that you can skip a lot of steps doing this, from like the users updating, the person with the actual app updating your SDK and so on. Like, which step are you skipping? Because to me it seems like, is it the only step you're skipping is the user updating the app?
No, yeah, so I started repeating the question, but I realized you have a mic, so habit. No, you're skipping also the app creator publishing a new app. This is basically the same idea as Microsoft's code push, which is that if you have an app that is mostly JavaScript, you can pull down new JavaScript from the web, securely signed, hopefully, not just like a random source that someone could like hack your router and intercept, but signed so that the client and server can verify that it's from a trusted source. And if you can do that, you can update any logic in the app that doesn't need new native components. So as long as you have thought about writing a native bridge, and this is the same as with, well, I keep coming back to React Native because that's what I'm working with right now. But basically, if you have included the native libraries that you need, you can basically change any behavior as long as you don't need something new. And through the magic of JavaScript.
Nice. We like the magic of JavaScript. Are there any more questions? All right, so thank you once again.
Yeah.
And we will take a 10-minute break before Daniela has her presentation. So grab another beer, grab some pizza.